Now the Lord said to Joshua,
Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. Take all the people of war with you, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai.
Right? Because the reason why they had lost the first time is because one of the soldiers had taken some spoils for themselves, some accursed items that God said, do not take. Right? He said, all the silver and gold go to the tabernacle and don't take any of these accursed items. Right? But some guy took some stuff. When they were going up against Jericho. So the next battle, they lost. So now we're getting that rematch.
His people, his city, and his land. And you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king. Only its spoil and its cattle you shall take as booty for yourselves. Lay an ambush
they weren't allowed to
for
take
the
it from
city
Jericho.
behind it.
So Joshua arose, and all the people of war, to go up against Ai. And Joshua chose 30,000 mighty men of valor, and sent them away by night. And he commanded them,
Behold, you
This
shall
is the use
lie
of the words mighty men of valor. I think Moses had also said something mighty men, right? And in Genesis 6, right? The mighty men, the men of renown, the mighty men of old, the men of renown, right? Some people think that they were the offspring of the of fallen angels and human women coming together, and so they were giants. But they're using the same phrase, mighty men, over here. So, I mean, that's a huge topic we can delve into at a later date. So let's keep going with this.
Behold, you shall lie in ambush against the city, behind the city. Do not go very far from the city, but all of you, be ready. Then I and all the people who are with me will approach the city, and it will come about, when they come out against us, as at the first, that we shall flee before them. For they will come out after us till we have drawn them from the city, for they will say, They are fleeing before us, as at the first. Therefore, we will flee before them. Then you shall rise from the ambush and seize the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hand. And it will be, when you have taken the city.
Go back a little bit.
The Lord.
Behold, you shall lay in ambush against the city behind the city. Right? So they had people camped out behind the city. And then the rest of the forces will come in from the front. And they will come out after them. And they will flee. Right? So they're literally drawing them out from the front and then ambush them from the back. That's pretty crazy. There's this really cool animated series called In the Beginning. I think it was like a Japanese anime that was dubbed English. And it's on YouTube. Someone uploaded them all on YouTube. And it depicts this, and it's actually pretty accurate. The depictions it talks mostly about the Old Testament in the beginning from I think the first 5 books. No, more than the first 5 books. But it's mostly like the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Probably not even much Leviticus. Genesis, Exodus. Yeah, gotta be Leviticus. Joshua. Because not much happened in Deuteronomy. I think it did get some stuff in Deuteronomy. But yeah, it's a really cool show. I'll link it down in the description for you guys.
Before them. Then you shall rise from the ambush and seize the city, for the Lord your God will deliver it into your hand. And it will be, when you have taken the city, that you shall set the city on fire. According to the commandment of the Lord you shall do. See, I have commanded you.
Joshua therefore sent them out, and they went to lie in ambush, and stayed between Bethel and Ai, on the west side of Ai. But Joshua lodged that night among the people. Then Joshua rose up early in the morning and mustered the people, and went up, he and the elders of Israel, before the people to Ai. And all the people of war who were with him went up and drew near, and they came before the city and camped on the north side of Ai. Now a valley lay between them and Ai. So he took about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai on the west side of the city. And when they had set the people, all the army that was on the north of the city and its rear guard on the west of the city, Joshua went that night into the midst of the valley. Now it happened, when the king of Ai saw it, that the men of the city hurried and rose early and went out against Israel to battle, he and all his people, at an appointed place before the plain. But he did not know that there was an ambush against him behind the city. And Joshua and all Israel made as if they were beaten before them, and fled by way of the wilderness. So all the people who were in Ai were called together to pursue them. And they pursued Joshua, and were drawn away from the city. There was not a man left in Ai or Bethel.
The final stand against at the gates of Mordor in Return of the King. It draw them out. I mean, but they didn't attack from within. I mean, I guess Frodo and Sam sort of attacked from within, right?
After Israel. So they left the city open and pursued Israel. Then the Lord said to Joshua,
Stretch out the spear that is in your hand toward Ai, for I will give it into your hand.
And Joshua stretched out the spear that was in his hand toward the city. So those in ambush arose quickly out of their place. They ran as soon as he had stretched out his hand, and they entered the city and took it, and hurried to set the city on fire. And when the men of Ai
the animated series literally had all that, like stretching out the arm, them running, like it depicted all that. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, I'm starting a new channel called Film Quest, talking about movies and stuff. So if you're into that, go ahead and check that out.
And behold, the smoke of the city ascended to heaven. So they had no power to flee this way or that way. And the people who had fled to the wilderness turned back on the pursuers. Now when Joshua and all Israel saw that the ambush had taken the city, and that the smoke of the city ascended, they turned back and struck down the men of Ai. Then the others came out of the city against them. So they were caught in the midst of Israel, some on this side and some on that side.
Sandwiched them.
And they struck them down, so that they let none of them remain or escape. But the king of Ai they took alive, and brought him to Joshua. And it came to pass, when Israel had made an end of slaying all the inhabitants of Ai in the field, in the wilderness where they pursued them, and when they all had fallen by the edge of the sword until they were consumed, that all the Israelites returned to Ai and struck it with the edge of the sword. So it was that all who fell that day, both men and women, were 12,000.
Oh, nobody died.
Ai.
So we had the 36 that died that first go round with the people of Ai. Now this time nobody died. All right, Joshua. Nice victory.
Bore back his hand, with which he stretched out the spear, until he had utterly destroyed all the inhabitants of Ai. Only the livestock and the spoil of that city Israel took as booty
and
for
women and children
themselves,
as well,
according to the word of the Lord, which he had commanded Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a heap forever, a desolation to this day. And the king of Ai he hanged on a tree until evening. And as soon as the sun was down, Joshua commanded that they should take his corpse down from the tree, cast it at the entrance of the gate of the city, and raise over it a great heap of stones that remains to this day.
A lot of stones
Now
being
Joshua
piled up
built
remaining
an
to this
altar
day.
to the Lord God of Israel in Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the children of Israel. As it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of whole stones over which no man has wielded an iron tool. And they offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord, and sacrificed peace offerings. And there, in the presence of the children of Israel, he wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses, which he had written. Then all Israel, with their elders and officers and judges, stood on either side of the ark before the priests, the Levites, who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord, the stranger as well as he who was born among them. Half of them were in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded before, that they should bless the people of Israel. And afterward he read all the words of the law, the blessings and the cursings, according to all that is written in the book of the law.
Okay, because they did that.
There was not a word of all that
with
Moses
Moses.
had
Now they're doing it
commanded,
again.
which Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, with the women, the little ones, and the strangers who were living among them.
And Josh was a loyal follower of Moses. Okay. Joshua 9.
And it came to pass, when all the kings who were on this side of the Jordan, in the hills and in the lowland, and in all the coasts of the great sea toward Lebanon, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, heard about it, that they gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord.
Oh, are they teaming up?
But when
Yeah,
the
they gathered
inhabitants
together.
of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they worked craftily, and went and pretended to be ambassadors.
Okay, we're doing some
And
getting
they
some
took
strategy
old
right
sacks on
now.
their donkeys, old wineskins torn and mended, old and patched sandals on their feet, and old garments on themselves. And all the bread of their provision was dry and moldy. And they went to Joshua to the camp at Gilgal, and said to him and to the men of Israel,
We have come from a far country. Now, therefore, make a covenant with us.
Then the men of Israel said to the Hivites,
Perhaps you dwell among us. So how can we make a covenant with you?
But they said to Joshua,
We are your servants.
and Joshua said to them,
Who are you? And where do you come from?
From a very far country your servants have come.
Your
because
servants have
of the
come.
name of the Lord your God.
Ah.
For we have heard of his fame and all that he did in
A
Egypt.
blasphemy right there.
And all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan. To Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. Therefore our elders and all the inhabitants of our country spoke to us, saying, Take provisions with you for the journey, and go to meet them, and say to them, We are your servants. Now therefore make a covenant with us. This bread of ours we took hot for our
Hot.
provision
The way you
from
said
our
hot sounded like
houses
Winnie the
on the
Pooh.
day we departed to come to you. But now look, it is dry and moldy, and these wineskins which we filled were new, and see, they are torn. And these our garments and our sandals have become old.
So they're
because
positioning
of the
themselves as weak, like victims. Then they're going to attack. I mean, they're playing the long game here, but that's sort of what Joshua did in the short term with the last victory, right? They come in, and then they flee, right? They're scared, but then they ambush when Joshua gives a signal. They draw, right? They drew out the people of Ai. They're fleeing, and the people of Ai are being drawn out as they're running out. And then the ambush happens. So, similar concept, but this is playing the long game. And it's more, I feel like this is more deceptive because it's a slow burn, you know? That was just, hey, we're going to draw them out and you attack them from within. This is like, we're messing with your heads, you know?
A long journey.
Then the men of Israel took some of their provisions, but they did not ask counsel of the Lord. So Joshua made peace with them, and made a covenant with them to let them live. And the rulers of the congregation swore to them.
God didn't tell them what's going
on? At
on?
the end of 3 days, after they had made a covenant with them, that they heard that they were their neighbors who dwelt near them. Then the children of Israel journeyed and came to their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kirjath-jearim. But the children of Israel did not attack them, because the rulers of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel.
Why didn't God say anything?
And all the congregation complained against the rulers. Then all the rulers said to all the congregation,
"We have sworn to them by the Lord God of Israel. Now, therefore, we may not touch them."
All the congregation complained. So, do they know what's up, or are they just not trusting?
"Will do to them. We will let them live, lest wrath be upon us because of the oath which we swore to them. Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for all the congregation, as the rulers had promised them."
Then Joshua called for them, and he spoke to them.
Why have you deceived us, saying we are very far from you, when you dwell near us? Now, therefore,
some fishy in
you
the
are
story.
cursed, and none of you shall be freed from being slaves, woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God.
Because your servants were clearly told that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land
So they were
from
scared,
before you.
or pretending to be scared.
Therefore we were very much afraid for our lives because of you, and have done this thing. And now, here we are in your hands. Do with us as it seems good and right to do to us.
So he did to them, and delivered them out of the hand of the children of Israel, so that they did not kill them. And that day Joshua made them woodcutters and water carriers for
Man,
the
they're really playing the
congregation
long game.
and for the altar of the Lord, in the place which he would choose, even to this day.
I'm waiting for things to turn, right? Right? Yeah. These are the people that were pretending, right?
Now it came to pass, when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel.
Wait,
and were
come
among
on.
them.
I thought they were pretending. What's going on here? Right? But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard that what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they worked craftily and went and pretended to be ambassadors. And they took old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins, torn and mended. And they went to Joshua's camp at Gilgal. Right? The Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite heard about it, that they gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord. Okay. So two separate things going on. These group of people gathered together to fight, while when the Gibeonites heard about it, they pretended to be ambassadors to make peace. So these guys are scared. These guys are angry. Two separate things. These guys are not like going in there spying, trying to figure out how to find their weakness and try to infiltrate and destroy them. No. These guys genuinely are scared and want peace. And these guys want to take them on. Okay, so the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites.
Now it came to pass, when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. Therefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhiah, king of Lachish, and Deber, king of Eglin, saying...
But what are the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Jebusites, who else? The Perizzites, the Hivites, the Canaanites. What are they doing right now? Right, they gathered together to fight against Joshua's army, the children of Israel. But what are they doing? I mean, that's back in chapter 9, but I'm curious. Let's see what this Bible has to say anything. The coalition of Canaanite kings banded together to oppose Israel. The text does not say whether this coalition ever actually fought Israel. It disappears from the scene after verse 2. 6 ethnic groups in Canaan who often are mentioned together are listed here. God told Israel to destroy these nations, and he did not want Israel to become allies with them under any circumstances. All right, so they were just mentioned there in chapter 9, then just not that army, that alliance was never mentioned again. Interesting. Yeah. They probably freaked out because of this reason we're going to find out right now.
Sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth,
I guess we already passed that. And how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them, that they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai and all its men were mighty. So that's probably why that alliance never came to fruition. I mean, the alliance came to fruition, but nothing ever came out of it. They didn't really fight. At least it wasn't mentioned in the Bible. And they probably didn't fight. And why? They were probably scared of this alliance, Gibeon and the children of Israel.
Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhiah, king of Lachish, and Deber, king of Eglin, saying,
"Come up to me and help me, that we may attack Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel."
Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglin, gathered together and went up, they and all their armies, and camped before Gibeon, and made war against it. And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal.
"Do not forsake your servants. Come up to us quickly. Save us and help us. For all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have gathered together against us."
So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord
What if it was
sent
like
to
these Gibeonites knew that that they were going to align and come and fight them? So they're like, hey, these children of Israel are pretty strong. Let's go and align with them, so that we're gonna have some help when they come and attack. They did it preemptively.
Joshua,
"Do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hand. Not a man of them shall stand before you."
According to the Bible, that's not what happened. All right, I was just messing around. Sorry.
Joshua therefore came upon them suddenly, having marched all night from Gilgal. So the Lord routed them before Israel, killed them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, chased them along the road that goes to Beth-horon, and struck them down as far as Azekah and Makkedah. And it happened, as they fled before Israel, and were on the descent of Beth-horon, that the Lord cast down large hailstones from heaven on them, as far as Azekah, and they died.
That's pretty crazy.
There were more who died from the hailstones than the children of Israel killed with the sword.
Oh, dang.
Then
God has the
Joshua
highest KD
spoke to
right
the
now.
Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites
I mean,
before
obviously
the
he's
children
not-
of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel,
That was bad. Sorry.
Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Ajalon.
So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon their enemies.
Wait.
Is
We
this
can't go
not
past.
written
We
in
just
the
can't.
Book
We
of
can't.
Jasher?
We can't
Gibeon.
just slip by that right now. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel, and he said to the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon, and the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon their enemies.
And moon in the valley of Ajalon.
So the sun stood still, and the moon
I
stopped,
think I
till the people had revenge upon their enemies.
I think all right, we're getting into some crazy stuff right now. Let's finish up this section.
Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been no day like that, before it or after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of a man. For the Lord fought for Israel.
Oof.
Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal.
All right. What is the book of Jasher or Jasher? It's not in the Bible. And why is it being referenced? It is one of the books of the Apocrypha, right? Like the book of Enoch, right? I don't know much about the book of Jasher at all. So what is it saying when it says, is this not written in the book of Jasher? Was this prophesied in the book of Jasher? And who wrote the book of Jasher? That Joshua had read it. The children of Israel had probably read it. And they're referencing it right now. And how is the sun and moon standing still? Because, right? Isn't the earth the one that is moving? I mean, the sun and the moon are moving as well. But if the sun stands still, we're still rotating around it. So it's still going to look like we're moving. So it's from their purview that the sun is standing still. So how would that happen? The earth would need to stop rotating. Or stop rotating, right? Yeah. It would need to stop, spinning on its axis. And I think I saw a video from, what's that famous, scientist that is, on National Geographic, on the Discovery or whatever, all these channels, on these documentaries. Tyson. You know what I'm talking about. What is that guy? Scientist? Tyson? Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was talking about what would happen if the sun stood still, aka if we stopped spinning on our axis, for it to hold still and not move. He said that if that happened, due to the speed of the spin of the earth, right, 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, we would be vaporized. Life on earth would be vaporized, right? It would not work. That does not make any sense for this to happen. But if you look at, this is the Hebrew cosmology, right? This is what they all believed back in the day. What's a nice big one? Right? This is what they believed all back in the day, right? That the sun and the moon are within the earth system, right? That's a firmament, right? We talked about this when we were going over Genesis. So, if within the earth system, right, you have the sun and the moon moving around while the earth is stationary, the earth and the sun and the moon can stop. That's fine. That'll work. Let's see if there's a picture of it top down. Like a top view. All right, but see, like, this is the face. I mean, like, a lot of ancient cultures believed this. The sun and the moon will rotate around this way, right? Over the face of the earth. And if that's the case, this makes sense, right? Because it can stop. I'm just saying. But what is the Book of Jasher? What is written in the Book of Jasher? What is this? Joshua 10, 13, the Book of Jasher. Joshua 10, 13, Book of Jasher. What was written in the Book of Jasher? Who wrote the Book of Jasher? Anybody know? What is the Book of Jasher, and should it be in the Bible? The Book of Jasher is mentioned in Joshua 10:13, when the Lord stopped the sun in the middle of the day during the battle of Beth Horon. Okay. The question is, if the Book of Jasher is mentioned in the Bible, why is it left out? We don't care about that at this point. The passage recorded in Joshua 10:13 is a good example. In recording this battle, Joshua includes passages from the Book of Jasher, not because it was his only source of what occurred. Rather, it was stating in effect, if you don't believe what I'm saying, then go read it in the Book of Jasher. Even that book has a record of this event. So was Jasher written around the same time? So, is what it's being said is this section right here was written in the Book of Jasher? Right, because it said, is this not written in the Book of Jasher? After this section was said, right? And he said, in the sight of Israel, sun stand still, moon stand still, until we get revenge on the enemies. So maybe this section was written in the Book of Jasher. And which would mean that Joshua was written after the Book of Jasher. And which would also mean that the Book of Jasher was written after this happened, unless it was prophesied in the Book of Jasher. So, anybody know who wrote the Book of Jasher? Let's look it up. I'm curious. Who wrote the Book of Jasher? King Solomon? Jasher is not the name of a person. This is a book of the upright, in addition to the knowledge. King Solomon? How? Okay, so if it was written by King Solomon, then it was not written at the time of the events that occurred, before Joshua had written it. That means, that can't be. It couldn't have been written by Solomon. Makes no sense. Does it say anything else? Solomon wasn't born when the Book of Joshua was written. Exactly. The Book of Jasher, all questions answered. the origin of the Book of Jasher. As expressed previously, there are those naysayers that dispute the validity of the Book of Jasher. So we will be looking at the historical background of the Book of Jasher. Unfortunately, the lack of belief in other scriptures has wrought a lot of confusion about which Book of Jasher to read. Which Book of Jasher? Like versions of the Bible? Or what do you mean? Yes, I did say which Book of Jasher. Okay, that's kind of confusing, right? I say this because there are some fraudulent translations, and because of this, many people are just write off all versions as not useful, whatever that means. Okay, how do we know which are fraudulent and which are not? The truth is, the only real way to know if the books are valid is the Bible. Books are valid in the Bible is to read the scriptures, as the scriptures tell us to. 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show thyself approved unto the Lord, unto God. What am I reading? Study to shew thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. All right, but who wrote it? Who wrote the Book of Jasher? Anybody know? What we know about the Book of Jasher, the Book of Just Ones. We don't know who wrote the Book of Jasher. Since Joshua makes mention of the book, the writer must have written the text prior to the time of the judges, even though the text seems to talk about Joshua's death as well. Yeah, that could be the case. I mean, it doesn't have to be all written at the same time, right? It could be written. It could be written over an extended period of time. Right? Not only after he died or before he died, Perhaps several writers compiled the 91-chapter book. Or, as the article suggests, perhaps no such book even existed during the time of Joshua, which was impossible because we just saw here. Unless they're saying that this is fabricated somehow.
Still.
Well, let's continue, right? Because we don't have a lot of information on the Book of Jasher. If you guys know any information about the Book of Jasher and which version is the correct translation and all that stuff, let me know down in the comment section.
In the midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been
still over Gibeon.
So, is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been no day like that, before it or after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of a man. For the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. But these 5 kings had fled, and hidden themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And it was told Joshua,
The 5 kings have been found, hidden in the cave at Makkedah.
Roll large stones against the mouth of the cave, and set men by it to guard them. And do not stay there yourselves, but pursue your enemies and attack their rear guard. Do not allow them to enter their cities, for the Lord your God has delivered them into your hand.
Then it happened, while Joshua and the children of Israel made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter, till they had finished, that those who escaped entered fortified cities. And all the people returned to the camp, to Joshua at Makkedah, in peace. No one moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel.
Dang.
Then Joshua said,
Open the mouth of the cave, and bring out those 5 kings to me from the cave.
And they did so, and brought out those 5 kings to him from the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglin. So it was, when they brought out those kings to Joshua, that Joshua called for all the men of Israel, and said to the captains of the men of war who went with him,
Come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings.
And they drew near, and put their feet on their necks.
Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed. Be strong and of good courage, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight.
And afterward, Joshua struck them.
We saw that faith
and
from
killed
Joshua back in the day, back when they went to spy Canaan with the 10 spies, remember? Joshua and Caleb had that faith right from the get-go.
them, and hanged them on 5 trees.
Oh, dang.
And they were hanging on the trees until evening. So it was at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them down from the trees, cast them into the cave where they had been hidden, and laid large stones against the cave's mouth, which remain until this very day. On that day Joshua took Makkedah and struck it and its king with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed them, all the people who were in it. He let none remain. He also did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua passed from Makkedah, and all Israel with him, to Libnah. And they fought against Libnah. And the Lord also delivered it and its king into the hand of Israel. He struck it and all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword. He let none remain in it, but did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Then Joshua passed from Libnah, and all Israel with him, to Lachish. And they encamped against it, and fought against it. And the Lord delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel, who took it on the 2nd day, and struck it and all the people who were in it with the edge of the sword, according to all that he had done to Libnah. Then Horam, king of Gezer, came up to help Lachish, and Joshua struck him and his people until he left him none remaining.
It would make a
From
cool video
Lachish,
game set in this time period, I feel. That'd be really cool.
Joshua passed to Eglin, and all Israel with him, and they encamped against it and fought against it. They took it on that day and struck it with the edge of the sword. All the people who were in it he utterly destroyed that day, according to all that he had done to Lachish. So Joshua went up from Eglin, and all Israel with him, to Hebron, and they fought against it. And they took it and struck it with the edge of the sword, its king, all its cities, and all the people who were in it. He left none remaining, according to all that he had done to Eglin, but utterly destroyed it and all the people who were in it. Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to Debir, and they fought against it. And he took it and its king and all its cities. They struck them with the edge of the sword, and utterly destroyed all the people who were in it. He left none remaining. As he had done to Hebron, so he did to Debir and its king, as he had done also to Libnah and its king.
And they're on a killing spree right now.
So Joshua conquered all the land, the mountain country, and the south, and the lowland, and the wilderness slopes, and all their kings. He left none remaining, but utterly destroyed all that breathed, as the Lord God of Israel had commanded. And Joshua conquered them from Kadesh Barnea as far as Gaza, and all the country of Goshen, even as far as Gibeon. All these kings and their land Joshua took at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel.
That must have been, right? Because
Joshua,
the children of Israel stayed in Goshen, right? When they were slaves in Egypt. So, I mean, that must have been a big deal, right? Taking back a territory that they were familiar with.
Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal.
All right, that's it for today. We did a lot of conquering today. Holy. And we touched on very interesting topics with the sun standing still, the Book of Jasher. So tomorrow we're going to be jumping into Joshua chapter 11, which is going to be talking about, let's see, the northern conquest. Holy, how many people are going to be conquesting? They're going to be taking over everybody. They just finished the southern conquest. Now we're going for the northern conquest. They're hitting everybody. Let me see how close is. Dang, yeah, they're off. They're off on a killing spree right now. Goshen, I'm just curious. Goshen and Egypt. I want to see the proximity between the two. The land of Goshen. I mean, was all this Nile, Thebes, all this considered Egypt, right? So they were all the way. They're coming all the way down. The entire area of Goshen is theirs now. And then they're up here. Right? Because it's the promised land up here, right? It's all Goshen, Sinai, Judah, the land of Goshen. What is Goshen in the land of Goshen? I guess this is just showing that this is part of it as well. Amp. I meant map. Right? Red Sea. Red Sea, Dead Sea. Okay. Promised Land. Dead Sea. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's crazy. So they're going way down. They're going all this down over onto this side or down over here. Getting Goshen. Okay, that's cool. They're conquering a whole lot. They're getting back, right? All this. Yeah, see? This became the promised land right here. Boom, boom, boom. Right? Because they're getting all this. That would be Goshen right there. Dang, that's crazy. So they're getting some familiar territory to them. That must be nice. All right, so that's it for today. We just finished Joshua 8 to 10. Tomorrow we're going to jump into 11 with more conquesting. And I'll see you guys then, all right? You guys take care. Bye-bye.